My wife Ashley and I arrived at the Connor family estate at 4 in the afternoon. It was Friday, and the Connor family reunion was scheduled for the long Memorial Day weekend. The family estate was so large that it didn't have a single bedroom. I married into the wealthy Connor family. Ashley Connor was one of the most coveted representatives of the descendants of her grandparents, Timothy and Rose Connor, and I achieved her hand in marriage. Jeff Barton was the first to arrive at the spacious log house. It had actually been an inn 50 years ago. It had a dozen bedrooms, 14 bathrooms, 2 kitchens, a huge game room with all sorts of animal heads hanging on the walls, and 5 fireplaces. The care and upkeep of the house kept the couple, who lived a mile down the road, busy year-round. Jeff married Ashley's first cousin, Amber Connor. Amber was as swarthy blonde as Ashley, just as beautiful and almost 10 years younger than Ashley. She and Jeff had a 12-year-old daughter, Amy, and a baby due in 2 months. Jeff was about 5 years younger than me and 2 years younger than Ashley. Shortly after we arrived, Bill and Agnes Winters arrived. Agnes was another first cousin and Bill was her husband. It was the responsibility of the early arrivals to make sure everything was ready for the influx of about 60 family members, friends, and guests who were scheduled to arrive all day Saturday. We had little to do as caretakers filled freezers, refrigerators, shelves, and whiskey cabinets in anticipation of the annual holiday. Jeff arrived alone. His wife Amber and daughter Amy had spent a few days visiting Ashley's mom in Nicholson and would be traveling with her to the retreat on Saturday morning. Almost from the moment I walked in the door, Jeff shoved a fresh beer into my hands. The first couple were gladly accepted, but by the third glass I was getting suspicious. I was known for falling into a very deep and prolonged sleep after drinking more than 4 or 5 beers in a short period of time. Because of this, Jeff became my best friend in the world. 20-plus years before that, he had physically carried me unconscious out of a burning house owned by a mutual friend of ours. That night at a party, I drank about 4 beers in excess. I collapsed into an empty bed around midnight. Around 3 in the morning, Jeff, who was also staying the night with us, woke up to the smell of smoke and alerted everyone sleeping in the house. He woke everyone up except me. As he told me many times later, he shook me and then slapped me, but I didn't even open my eyes. As smoke billowed around us, Jeff put his arms around my neck and pulled me out the front door. I never woke up until he dropped my boxer-clad ass on the snow in the yard. After that, we were almost inseparable. We had a lot of things planned for tomorrow, and I guessed Jeff's plans. He was going to make sure I drank enough beer to be useless any time before noon, and then taunt me forever. By noon, our wives' parents were going to arrive and notice my non-participation. I started pouring beer down the drain when I went to the bathroom. A couple times I insisted that I needed to go out to the car to get my forgotten items and spilled the contents of my bottle on the road. I was determined to be sober and awake for the weekend's festivities and to surprise Jeff with my newfound powers of recuperation. A little after 11, I began to have trouble staying awake. I knew the reason for my fatigue was the long drive to the rest area, but Jeff made a few jokes about not holding my beer as I excused myself and headed for bed. Ashley, Jeff, Agnes, and Bill were still telling stories downstairs when I dozed off. I woke up to the sound of Bill and Agnes' quiet laughter as they headed to their bedroom, adjacent to ours. I knew Ashley would be climbing into bed with me soon. I dozed off again. The next time I woke up, I immediately sat up and looked around. Something wasn't right. I groped around Ashley's side of the bed. She wasn't there and she wasn't. My stomach rumbled as I got out of bed and wandered down the hallway. I listened to Jeff's bedroom door and heard only quiet breathing. I quickly but methodically searched the remaining empty bedrooms, as well as every other room I thought possible. Finding nothing, I decided to check the occupied bedrooms. I tried Jeff's door, but it appeared to be locked. I quickly went back to my room and pulled a penknife out of my jeans. I went back to Jeff's door and used the small blade of the screwdriver to unlock the bedroom door. I quietly opened the door and peeked inside. I forced my stomach to relax. The moonlight was bright enough to illuminate Ashley lying on her side. She was naked. Jeff pressed himself against her, holding her left breast in his hand. I quickly closed the door and headed for the bathroom. I never made it there. Vomit was spewing out of me like a scene from The Exorcist. I had pretty much smeared the wall and the carpet on the floor. Thinking I needed to clean up quickly, I suddenly grinned grimly. Vomit on the floor was the least of my worries. I walked down the stairs to the den. I removed a brick from the fireplace and pulled out a key. It easily opened the fireproof gun safe. I considered my options. Looking into a small container at the bottom of the safe, I saw several shell casings for a 12-gauge shotgun. The decision was made for me. I walked up the stairs, loading my Remington Goose shotgun and contemplating the situation. I would completely blow Jeff's head off. It didn't seem like a big deal to me. I grinned wickedly again at my mental pun. Would the trauma of her sleeping lover's brains smeared across the bedspread and headboard be worse for Ashley than the bullet itself? If I let Ashley live, will she suffer the way I want her to suffer for the rest of her life? Or would her pipes be cleared by some other bastard before I was even brought to justice? Shit. I'd be arrested and locked up for life. What would my kids, Arlene and Jeffrey, think of me if I shot their mom? What about if, once convicted, I slept with some big bastard named Bubba? That's not something that will make my kids remember me fondly. As I reached the top of the stairs, I realized I couldn't shoot Ashley. I would rather give my life to save her than hurt her in any way. Isn't that how you should treat someone you love? Could I kill Jeff? I had no doubt he deserved it, but did his wife and family deserve the pain his death would cause? Amber was a wonderful woman, and I always had a special place in my heart for her. She would surely hate me if I killed her husband, no matter how good my reasons were. I entered the room and held the barrel of the shotgun a few feet from Jeff's head. He was sound asleep without letting go of Ashley's chest, and a smile played on his lips. My hand shook as I pulled the safety off the gun. Beads of sweat beaded on my forehead. My breathing became ragged. I stepped back and lowered the gun. Jeff had saved my life years ago. If he'd left me to die in this bed, I never would have met Ashley. I would never have had my two wonderful children. Maybe the problem was me. I wasn't satisfying Ashley. Jeff obviously treated me with contempt. Maybe everyone felt that way. Why keep it up? I took the shotgun by the barrel and brought it up to my mouth. I smiled, imagining the scene that awaited Ashley and Jeff in a few seconds. They would regret their infidelity when they would be awakened by the shotgun blast and flying brain parts. Then reality caught up with me. I marveled at how far away the trigger was. I couldn't reach it. Damn, I was pathetic. I turned around and walked out of the room. I didn't bother to close the door. I just put the gun against the wall I wasn't throwing up against, walked around the mess on the floor, and went back to my room. 3 minutes later, I was getting dressed and pulling my car into the driveway. I needed to leave before I did something stupid. I drove until dawn and then stopped on an old log road. I slept for a couple hours, woke up feeling like crap, and continued on my way. I was headed home. I needed to pack up my personal belongings and leave before Ashley could stop me, if she cared at all. Out of habit, I stopped at the convenience store gas station I always used when I drove down this road. Parking on the curb, I went inside and bought a 16-ounce can of beer. After thinking about it, I went back in and bought a second can. As I was paying the clerk, I saw Jeff's white Navigator pull up to the gas stations. His wife, Amber, was behind the wheel, and my mother-in-law was in the front passenger seat. Amber's daughter, Amy, jumped out of the back door and circled the white van, heading toward the front of the store. Suddenly, a man opened the van door, jumped out, and threw some kind of blanket over Amy, covering her almost to her ankles. A big, burly man followed him out of the van and began quickly wrapping duct tape around the bottom edge of the blanket. Amber got out of the car to get gas and must have heard something wrong. She rushed over to the van and saw the bigger guy getting Amy into the van and the smaller guy getting behind the wheel. My respect for Amber increased tenfold when I saw her swoop down on the big guy. She was 7 months pregnant, half the size of the guy, but willing to do whatever it took to protect her baby. By this time, I had already covered the distance from the register to the door. I was moving at full speed when I got to the guy Amber was attacking. He was holding her by the throat, pinning her against the wall. I couldn't see his other hand, but it looked like he had yanked it away and was about to punch her. He heard me approaching and turned to face me. This guy was at least 50 pounds heavier than me. This was no time for Queensberry rules. I swung the plastic bag containing 2 cans of beer as hard as I could. He managed to land a hard blow to my chest just before the can slammed into his head. I was surprised at how much it hurt my chest, but I was too anxious to pay much attention to it. And then the van took off. The sliding door slammed shut as the van swung over the curb and headed for the access ramp on Highway 81. Amber fell to the ground and grabbed her throat. Ashley's mom got out of the Navigator. As the van drove away, she was able to survey the scene and quickly rushed over to Amber. The big guy was lying motionless on the ground, and a small crowd had formed around him. I yelled to the young woman to call 911 as she approached. While she dialed the number, I told a middle-aged man to use some duct tape lying on the ground to secure the wounded thug. If he came to his senses, he'd be mad as hell. Seeing that the keys to the Navigator were still in the ignition, I ran over to it and jumped in. I started it up, put it in gear, and pressed the pedal to the floor. I didn't make a U-turn toward the access ramp. I aimed for the hill between me and Highway 81. The big Navigator crashed into the woven wire fence set up to keep drivers from doing what I was doing. I jerked the steering wheel sharply to the right, pulling onto the highway sidewalk in front of the tractor trailer. The tires squealed as I slipped into the fast lane, allowing the tractor trailer to overtake me on the right. It didn't stay in front of me long as I squeezed the pedal. I could hear parts of the wire fence dragging along the sides of the SUV, but I paid no attention to it. Jeff could get a new car any day of the week. I was speeding up to 120 when I noticed a van coming over a slight incline in the road. Not surprisingly, the driver decided to get off the interstate as soon as possible. He turned off the bottom of the ramp and headed south. I braked and clipped the steering wheel, and just had time to turn off the ramp before the van disappeared from sight. I managed to stop at the very bottom of the ramp and turn left. The van was now in my line of sight, and I was following him at a distance. As long as he was driving, he couldn't hurt Amy, I reasoned. I pulled out my cell phone, turned it on, and dialed 911. I explained the situation as best I could. I told the dispatcher the name of the highway I was on and the direction I was traveling. He cautioned me against any contact with the suspect and urged me to just follow the vehicle. I continued to keep him on the line, following the van through the countryside. Suddenly, the van turned left, traveled down a dirt road, and pulled into an old barn. I continued down the same road as before. I then parked away from the barn and walked back so I could see the barn. As I watched the bandit close the doors, I noticed that sweat was pouring into my eyes and I felt faint. I explained to the dispatcher where I was. He told me that the state police were about 40 minutes away and to hold still and wait. I realized that 40 minutes was too long to leave Amy captive to the creep. How could I help her sooner? I hung up the phone and dialed 911 again. Talking to another dispatcher, I reported the barn fire and gave the location. I insisted that it was large and that the fire department had better hurry. Then, I hung up the phone again. In rural America, I realized one thing. Volunteer firefighters took their job seriously and responded with amazing speed. 3 minutes later, I saw the first pickup truck rushing toward the barn. The other was right behind it. By the time I started the Lincoln and pulled it up to the barn, 5 volunteers were already moving around looking for the fire. I was surprised at how hard it was for me to climb out of the SUV. My legs failed, and I fell to the ground in front of a couple firefighters. "Holy shit!" remarked the closest of them. "You got stabbed! The damn knife is still in your chest!" For some reason, I was relieved to hear that. My chest hurt like hell, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. "My niece was kidnapped by a bastard in a white van," I whispered. "He's in that barn. She's 12 years old, and she needs help now." I stayed conscious long enough to see several guys turn and head toward the barn. A siren wail was heard nearby, and then there was silence. I woke up several times for short periods of time. I heard voices and felt pain, seemingly in my sleep. When I opened my eyes, I saw a smiling nurse looking down at me. "Well, Mr. King, you've had quite a day. Relax and get well. I'll be right in and take care of you," she offered as I drifted back into sleep. Morning came and I pulled myself up in bed. The doctor explained that I had indeed been stabbed in the chest, but incredibly my heart and lungs had been hit. I had lost a lot of blood, and that was the most serious problem. After a large amount of plasma transfusion, I felt much better. Ashley and her cousin Agnes entered the room quietly. Agnes walked over to me while Ashley kept to the side. "Tom King, you've had a hell of a couple days. I'm so glad you're going to be okay. We're all glad, Tom," she continued. "You did a wonderful thing. You saved Amber and her unborn child. That asshole was getting ready to stab her when you intervened. They kept her overnight at the hospital because she's very pregnant and had such a traumatic day, but she's resilient, and she's fine. Amy is fine, thanks to you. Things didn't go so well for that asshole who locked her in the barn when the volunteer firefighters found out about his plans. Most of them have families of their own. People who risk their lives for others have no tolerance for sick bastards who want to hurt children. The kid will be fine, but he needed surgery when they brought him in yesterday. That big bastard you wrecked in the parking lot wasn't so lucky, Tom. He didn't make it." I felt numb as I listened to Agnes. I had killed the guy with the beer I planned to drink to forget my troubles. Good thing I didn't limit myself to a couple bags of chips. The news of the guy's death didn't cheer me up, but he made his choice and paid for it. I didn't let his death bother me too much. I had enough to worry about as it was. "I'm here to help Ashley, Tom. She's mortally ashamed of her actions. I woke up early, went to the kitchen, and found a mess in the hallway. Then I found the shotgun and got scared. In a panic, I rushed to Jeff's room and found Ashley sleeping in Jeff's bed. I woke them up and demanded an explanation. Ashley was horrified. Jeff wasn't much better. When they saw the shotgun and then the vomit all over the house, they both felt sick. Ashley, though, added to her mess right on the carpet. After we discovered your car was gone, the real shit started. Ashley's mom called and told us how Amber was attacked and almost stabbed and Amy was kidnapped. Then she told us how you took down a big thug and drove off in Jeff's Navigator to follow the guy who kidnapped Amy. She told us that you did it all with a knife stuck in your chest. She was so shocked that we had a hard time getting her to tell us, but her endless praise of your actions was very understandable. Try to imagine what was going through Jeff and Ashley's minds. They betrayed you in the most horrible way, and in return you saved Jeff's family. Hell, you even stuck a knife in their chests. Ashley's afraid, Tom. She's afraid to talk to you, to apologize to you. She doesn't want to upset you, but she's desperate to take care of you and nurse you back to health. Will you talk to her, Tom? She's a stupid bitch, but she's my blood and she loves you, believe it or not." Agnes concluded the frank conversation. "I haven't had much time to figure it all out, Agnes. As you know, I almost did a terrible thing that night. I even came close to ending my own life with that shotgun. Who would have thought that the damn trigger was so far from the end of the barrel?" I joked darkly. Agnes feigned surprise, and Ashley gasped and burst into tears. "Tom, I'm so glad it didn't work out for you. Can you imagine how awful the ordeal at that gas station would have been if you had succeeded? Maybe that awful mistake of Ashley's saved 3 lives, one of which has not yet been born," Agnes suggested. "Ashley, sit next to me and hold my hand, please," I commanded firmly. "I have guests coming over soon, and I want us to be together to prevent any rumors, at least for now. I need to have time to figure out where we go next. Could you do that for me?" "Of course, Tom," Ashley sobbed. "Thank you for letting me be with you. I know I deserve whatever you decide, but right now, I'm happy just sitting with you." I didn't say anything back as Ashley slowly picked herself up. Her cousin Agnes left the room assuring me that she and Bill would not talk about the events of Friday night. Soon Amber, Amy, and a clearly uncomfortable Jeff entered the room. Amber and Amy were grinning from ear to ear as they rushed over to my bed. "Tom, you really are my hero," Amber exclaimed, leaning over and kissing me warmly on the lips. "That guy was ready to finish me off. All I could think about was saving the baby and getting Amy back. It's like heaven sent you out of nowhere to save us. When I saw the knife in your chest, I couldn't even speak. You were unbelievable. I told the police how you saved me. They should question you when they get a chance. But don't worry about them. Nothing melts a man's heart like the crying of a pregnant woman. They know you're one of the good guys." Ashley, I've told you this before, but I want you to know that you have the best husband in our family and probably in the entire state. He is everything a woman could ever hope for. He's a keeper. The baby boy I'm carrying will be named Thomas Jeffrey Burton in honor of your wonderful husband. Ashley smiled weakly as Amber leaned over and hugged her warmly. Thank you, Tom, for following that man and calling the fire department, Amy added. I was really scared. I was hoping my dad or you would find me. You two are the bravest men in the world. I accepted Amber and Amy's praise and gratitude. I felt awkward, but I knew they needed to show their appreciation. As they got ready to leave, I asked Jeff to stay. As soon as the door closed, I spoke up. Jeff, I almost did something terrible the other night, and I apologize, I began, to Jeff's obvious surprise. You saved my life years ago. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here. I owe you my life. I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. If you want to fuck Ashley, that's fine with me. You've earned the right to have all of mine. I just ask you to be more discreet in the future. Amber and Amy would be horrified if they knew Ashley was your mistress. It wouldn't help my standing in the family either. So, Jeff, could you be more discreet in the future when you sleep with Ashley? Please don't get her pregnant. I had a vasectomy 10 years ago, and that would really let the cat out of the bag. Tom, I'll never touch Ashley again, Jeff promised. It was a huge mistake. It was an accident, and I wish it hadn't happened. We all had too much to drink and just got stupid. I love Amber. I'll never risk losing her again. I swear it's a straight path for me. I owe you, buddy. For goodness sake, you saved my whole family. Ashley sighed and blushed brightly as she became the topic of our conversation. She released my hand and raised the napkin to her eyes. Jeff, stick to the story and you'll be fine. I know you tried to get me drunk on beer that night. Agnes was just pointing out that if you hadn't fucked my wife, I wouldn't have been in that parking lot to help Amber when all that shit happened. Funny how fate works, isn't it? You planned to sleep with Ashley, and not only did you get what you hoped for, but you saved your family's life. All I'm asking is that you be more discreet in the future when you sleep with her, okay? In public, act like there's nothing going on between you two, and I'll pretend I don't know you have her. It's necessary for my credibility with my family and my community. That's all I ask, Jeff. Please leave now. Jeff pretended like he wanted to object, but he headed for the door with a frown. I reprimanded him, and I wondered if it would make him ashamed and feel as small as I hoped it would. I'd saved his wife. He screwed mine. Who was better? Tom, you're harder now than you were before this mess. Jeff will never touch me again, even if I wanted him to, which I don't. Now he'll always worry that you think you're having an affair with him. It was a one-time thing, Tom, and it was a terrible mistake. It won't happen again. Jeff must feel terrible after what you told him. He'll always worry that Amber will find out about us, as will I, for that matter. He's going to suffer, Tom. You told him he could fuck me, as you so delicately put it, without asking me if I would allow it. I had to agree to such a thing before it could happen. It will never happen again. It might, Ashley. But I still want you to be careful with all your lovers, if you want. I'll pretend to believe you when you say you're going shopping or staying late at work, as long as you don't wipe my nose with your business. Show some respect and I won't stop you from sleeping with other men. Tom, I won't sleep with anyone but you. I stumbled once, but never again. I'll prove it to you no matter how long it takes. If you let me, of course, Ashley added sadly. That's exactly what I want to hear, Ashley, I replied. You retain your undying love for me, as well as your complete fidelity, and I shall never be suspicious or interested in where you are or what you are doing. I notice that you don't use protection with your lovers, so I'll take that over you. I've asked the doctor to check me for STDs while I'm here. I would advise you to get tested from time to time, too, for your own health. Besides, it would look bad if either of us caught something, wouldn't it? Ashley stared at me for at least a minute, studying my face to see if I was serious. Finally, she nodded her head. I can see how it would be, Tom. I feel like shit, and you're going to make sure I keep feeling like shit. What's worse is that you just don't trust me. You'll pretend to trust me even though you really don't. If I visit my mom or anyone else, I'll know you're suspicious. If I go to the mall, I'll know you think I might be cheating. You talk about my lovers, even after I told you I only cheated once with Jeff. You don't believe me, but why should I? I did that to myself. But you know what, Tom? Ashley asked. After all the crap I've been through, and worse, that you've been through, it's only fair. I'll feel better if I have to suffer for what I did. I will feel so much better if and when you start loving and trusting me again. but I welcome the pain necessary to get to that point. It will make forgiveness all the sweeter. I will not lose my way. I will no longer weaken. I can only offer you my love, complete loyalty and devotion. I hope that will be enough. If not, I have no one to blame but myself. I could see the determination on Ashley's face. How long could she hold out? How long could I? I loved her wholeheartedly. Did she kill him or could she save that love? I sincerely hoped she could, but now the burden was on her, and sadly I doubted it. At least I wouldn't have to spend my life in prison or swallow a 12-gauge barrel extracting my pound of flesh. I learned a long time ago that hurting or disappointing those I love ultimately hurts a lot more than a good old-fashioned ass whipping. Jeff and Ashley would find out, or so I hoped.